A lot of people in this community are obsessed with dose, but actually dose is kind of irrelevant when it comes to determining the intensity of your trip. Here's why. Okay, just to be clear, dose is 100% a factor, but dose does not equal intensity. In fact, it's often not even close. This is another reason why you should always start low, because even a low dose can be extremely powerful for a lot of people. You don't know your dose. Even if dose did equal intensity, how do you know you're taking the dose you've been told? Do you really think your drug dealer puts your well-being over his profits? When you're sold a 25 mg 2CB pill, it's probably not actually 25 mg. It's almost certainly not even 20 mg. In fact, it might not even be 10. And if you thought we were done, the truth is it could very well not even be 2CB, which is why testing your substances is so important. It's pretty cheap, could save your life, and it makes the trip way more comfortable. Kind of a no-brainer. And speaking of brains, everyone has a different brain and different brain chemistry. Actually, the brain isn't real, so... Whoops, sorry, that's always one of those guys. Anyways, everyone has a different natural tolerance to psychedelics. There's people who can take 500 mics of acid and not even feel it, whilst others can take 50 mics and trip really hard. We're all different, and even if it's not radically different, your 300 mics might be my 200 mics. We're not even talking about people taking medications, having different body weights and tolerance, which can all be huge factors in of themselves as well. Set and setting. Psychedelics are not like other drugs. If anyone watching has tried tripping in a forest and also tried tripping in silent darkness, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I would easily be less anxious about taking 300 mics of acid in a forest than taking 200 mics in silent darkness. And I could almost guarantee that the 200 mic trip would be far more intense. If you trip on 50 mics of acid to spend some time drawing, that's a very different trip to taking the same dose with the intention of doing shadow work. A lot of people have told me 200 mics isn't enough to experience ego death, but a lot of people can experience ego death sober. Sure, it might take meditating in a cave for a decade, but give that person a low dose and let them meditate, and they're gonna go way further into ego death than someone else taking a much higher dose. Your experience. Okay, so technically this would fit into set, but I want to talk about it separately because it's such an underappreciated factor. When people try psychedelics and go back to weed, they talk about weed being far more intense and trippy, but this can apply to returning to psychedelics as well.
Other psychedelics get potentiated after 5-MeO, and I was kind of like, yeah, okay. And then I took some mushrooms, and that was the first substance I've ever taken after my 5-MeO experience a few weeks ago. And it's like, wow, the mushroom experience was totally different.
Each time you trip, you open doors and they don't always close. In fact, sometimes you might blast them open so hard that they can't close. It's fair to say that after hundreds of psychedelic trips, 100 mics of acid is more intense than what 200 mics used to be. Now, to be fair, I still have more control, but I also have the ability to go 10 times deeper into ego death, because now I have a lot of experience in letting go of layers of ego that were pretty rock solid a few years ago and would have taken massive doses to reach. With every trip, I feel myself becoming more sensitive to psychedelics. Once those doors have been opened, you don't need that much effort to travel through them the second time, and once you've opened enough, get ready to trip harder from low doses than a YouTube prankster. Though just to be clear, being experienced with psychedelics does not necessarily do this. It really depends on how you trip. More on that on a future video. Combinations. A lot of people like to trip with weed, myself included, and let me tell you, without THC tolerance, you can make a 100 mic acid trip more intense than a 1000 mic acid trip if you smoke enough. Of course, if you have Snoop Dogg's tolerance, you might need to hire another blunt roller, and that's very different. But having any type of combination almost always means there's even less correlation between intensity and dose. Each of these points by themselves are already enough to radically affect how intense your trips are at each dose. But when you combine them together, you end up with people tripping on 500 mics of acid and going for a walk in a public park, telling the people tripping on 200 mics who don't even know that they're humans that have legs to walk with that they're pussies. Despite our similarities, we're also very different, and recognizing that would prevent a lot of suffering. Let's respect each other's experiences and make the world a better place. It's pretty hard to do if you're still stuck in psychedelic ego.